Welcome everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Stacy Shoemake, and I work with Dreambox Learning. We've been on a few other webinars, perhaps together, talking about Dreambox. Today's session is going to focus on a few items. So we're going to focus on updates, first of all, because here at Dreambox, we've been working really hard to present you with new things that you've been requesting. So I've got a few updates that are pretty exciting. We're also going to do a little bit of a Q&A after those updates to make sure that we're catering this webinar exactly to your needs and we get all those questions answered. Then we'll go into a conversation about how Dreambox addresses content for those K and pre-K students, as well as how to help them be successful in an environment in Dreambox. Then we'll go into how to review, just a quick review of data, and that's going to take us into AssignFocus, which is a feature that's been available to all of you this whole time you've been working in Dreambox. We're going to highlight it especially today, talking about both long and short-term assignments. And then, of course, I'm going to give you some extra goodies at the end of the session. As we go through the session, I see that Stephanie and Shannon and Larissa have all started to engage in the chat. If you have questions or comments and you don't want to stop me with the audio, you can more than welcome to do it with the group chat or send me a message as well. I do want to make sure that we make this webinar really rich and pertinent to you all, so it's a good use of your time. So do make sure that you stop me if you need anything. But we'll just dive right in. We're going to go ahead and get started with the updates. So three big updates that I want to share with you all since our last webinar are the student overview, which is a new view in the dashboard, lesson cards, and a feedback button. So these are all highlights within our dashboard. So I'm actually going to go ahead and open up that dashboard for you all and first show you the student overview. So one request that we've had quite often from the districts and schools that we work with is that they want a one-page kind of printable view of the student's information. So when you log into your dashboard now, you can click on your class. And if you want to take a look at a student and really track their data through the dashboard and see what kind of progress they've made, like my friend Charlie here, you can select that student from your class and it's going to take you to a brand new overview. Now in this overview, I can look at the data using any of the date ranges that I can in the rest of the dashboard. So today, last 7 days, 30, custom date range, or even the current school year. I'm going to keep it at 30 for right now. So we can see their average minutes per week for the time period that I select, as well as their lessons completed. If there are any alerts for that student, those things that we want to celebrate and things that we want to take a look at, Dreambox will let you know in the right-hand side of the screen here. As I scroll down the page, I can also see a student's proficiency and growth. Now, my friend Charlie is a kindergartner who hasn't worked quite a bit in Dreambox, but I can see his proficiency and growth highlighted by the green bars and the arrows. That lets us know that he has completed some standards in Dreambox and also that he's growing as he's learning. Also on the right-hand side, I can see the standards that he's made progress in, as well as the standards that he's met. Now, a little word about that, that data is going to change based upon the time period that you select. So right now, he just made progress in one standard, but if I increase the time period, he might have made progress in actually more standards for this school year. I know that he's actively working on an assignment that I gave him on building up to 20 optimally, and he's currently working on a few lessons, building to 10 optimally, as well as angle measurement and rotation. Now this is a sample account, so we know that generally a kindergartner wouldn't work on these two very different assignments, but this is just a bit of a sample here. Now, what I love about this is that sometimes we do need to bring some data with us into meetings about our students. So this is something that is printable. So you see our print button on the right-hand side. So you can print these off, and when you're having conversations with your teacher peers or administrators, or even with parents, you've got this one-page printable view of exactly what a student has accomplished in Dreambox, which can really help enrich some of your important academic conversations about your students. So that's the first of our updates. And just let me know as we go along if you have questions about any of these updates or anything we talk about. The second update that we're pretty excited about is the update to our lesson cards. So in our last webinars, we talked about interpreting those cards. I'll show you one of them just as an example. So these cards tell us how long students have spent in lessons, the standards connected to the lessons. I can even click play demo or play lesson buttons on these lesson cards to see the lesson that Streambox presented for the student. So we have some updates on these lesson cards. The first three you've actually probably seen before when you've looked through your students' activity feeds or your class's activity feeds. So we have a lesson group completed with demonstrated understanding. So this is really something to celebrate with those kids because that means that they work through multiple lessons. In fact, I can see 14 lessons here. I can also see if a student has completed a standard because I'll have a completed standard card. Or if a lesson has been completed, then we'll see the green check mark inside the green circle. This also happens to be an assigned lesson, which we'll get into later. But anytime you see this little blue notebook, that's our assignment icon, and that just lets you know that that was an assignment that you or maybe another teacher that works with that class made for the students in Dreambox. Now the last three are the ones we want to look out for, just as a reminder when students are working. The first one is this gray check mark. That means that the student did complete the lesson, but they had a little trouble and Dreambox decided we need to back the student up for the content for this particular standard or topic. So that's one we want to look out for. Another one that I get really concerned about is a pause button. A pause button means the student clicked into the lesson and clicked back out before the lesson was completed. So remember that for these students, we want to remind them how important it is to always complete lessons. And if they're having trouble with the lesson, use that help button. Remember, that's going to be the question mark. Now, the last card is really brand new, and I'm excited about this one because it surfaces more information for you all as educators about when your students are struggling. So this one lets you know that a student may need attention. Now, a student may need attention on a lesson when they have worked on a lesson within that lesson group, and we've adapted them back 2 or 3 times, and the student is still struggling. We want to make sure that you all know when a student is struggling, so that's when you're going to see this lesson card appear with the orange text and as well as the triangle with an exclamation point in it. Now, if you see this, you can always click the play lesson button and say, have that student come and play with you and see if they're using the help or hint button, or maybe it's the manipulative getting in the way. That's a really great way to provide a little bit of intervention for those students who might need a little extra nudge when they're working in Dreambox. And it's a great way to also see, hey, this may be something that I need to also, when I'm thinking about instruction in my classroom, this student might need a little extra support. So those are our brand new lesson cards. For our last new feature, great question, Larissa. So her question is, does that mean they've completed the exact same lesson 5 times? This actually means that they've completed a lesson within this lesson group 5 different times, so different lessons. So this is an indication that we've backed them up quite a bit, and we just want to let you know, hey, this is an area where they're struggling. So thanks for that question, Larissa. That's awesome. So our last little update here is back in that Insight dashboard. And I want to point you to the Send Feedback button. A lot of the brand new updates that we've had in Dreambox have been because of educator feedback. We really want to continue to collect that, and so we decided we need a button for that. So if you have any great ideas for us on how we can improve Dreambox, or maybe there's something about a lesson you just feel, oh, it's not quite working right, and here's how I do it, we want to hear that from you. So do click on that Send Feedback button. It's going to give you a way to reach out to the Dreambox team and let us know that you have some great ideas for us. They read these things on a regular basis, so do know that if you send some feedback, it's definitely going to be, we're definitely going to listen. So one last thing I want to tell you that is coming is we are also going to have in the K-2 environment a way for students to track their lesson completion. we'll get more on that probably in our next webinar when that comes out. But I wanted to let you know that I know that lesson completion is on your mind when students are working in Dreambox, and we're going to give students the way to track that on themselves, which is going to be really powerful when we put students at the helm of their own learning. So, all right. Great question from Shannon. Any tips for pruning a student profile? It always cuts off parts so you can't see the whole page. That's a good question. So let's investigate that just a little bit. So it should be able to print in one, sometimes 2 pages if the student, I've noticed, has quite a few lessons that they've opened. Let me take a look. So sometimes it does cut it off. I do see that, especially since the student has an alert. So it might print it in 2 pages. And I honestly haven't found a way to make it into one, but that's a good idea. I'll see if we can find a way to. I'll talk to our development team about that. And Jamie, you know what? I would love for you, if you have Dreambox specific feedback, you can go ahead and contact us. We want to hear that feedback too. And it might be something for your IT folks too, but we always want to hear it. So great. I'm so glad to hear that students are enjoying Dreambox, and the coins can be really motivating, those stories too. I know we've had some students who are just so motivated to get the lessons done to hear more in the stories. So. And we're going to talk about some things, Jamie, with that kindergarten students, talking about how to really support them. Yeah. And there'll be some way, I'll talk about some ways that we can still use it for some of the students in your instruction, even if maybe they're not ready to work independently, because that is a concern. They don't understand the concepts. Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about the concepts today too. All right, so we're going to go next into actually into the discussion about the pre-K and kindergarten. So this will kind of address some of what Jamie's talking about with students and readiness for Dreambox and the content too. So we're going to keep going. So for those pre-K and kindergarten students, we're going to talk about the content that's designed and kind of the rationale behind why Dreambox chooses the content, how we chose that content, and what we're really thinking about targeting for these students. So we're going to start just in talking about the age ranges and what's happening developmentally. So starting here, Dreambox curriculum expectations really are start with grade or age 2 expectations. So this table kind of explains some of the developmental levels that Dreambox really is working to support for comparing and ordering. This is also, by the way, cited our source here at the bottom. So this is from Doug Clements and Learning and Teaching Early Math. So just to go through this chart really quickly, when we're talking about comparing and ordering numbers, you really want the students to compare collections that are really noticeably different. So one's at least twice as large as the others. So you'll see that in some of the very, very initial lessons. Also see that students are identifying a number of objects in a group, small groups, and they're organized in different ways. Also looking to see that the student can match small equal collections of items that are not exactly the same. So to give you a kind of a visual of what that looks like in Dreambox, I'm going to go into those lesson groups. So 2 of the lesson groups, and these are the ones that we introduce to students very first thing when they work in Dreambox, are comparing 1 to 10 and identifying more, less, or equal. Okay, so we've got those nice visuals. And when they work with these visuals, the audio directions would be, we're going to ask them to find which one is more or find which one is less. Also in the second item on the right-hand side, we're going to ask them to tell us which ones are equal. So these are really the very introductory lessons. one thing to consider when you're first putting your students on Dreambox is, do they have that vocabulary? Because thinking back to my kindergarten students, they didn't come in with that. They knew bigger and smaller, but they didn't know the math vocabulary of more and less. So that may be something we need to emphasize for those students as they're getting started in Dreambox. And of course, we're going to introduce equal where they're the same. So moving forward with this, then we're going to we'll go into the next one. So this is also worth thinking about as students at age range of 2. Students can find sums for joining up problems. So if they've got 2 items and we ask them to add 3 more items into a 10 frame, for example, which is one of the structures that they'll work with, then we ask the student to count, how many items do you have now? So this is really getting them to work on adding and subtracting. And this is using their counting-based strategies to add and subtract at these early levels. So here's 2 examples. So beginning, adding, and removing, and building 1 to 10 optimally are the Dreambox learning units or lesson groups that the students would work in. So for example, on this left-hand side, they're using the 10 frame to add 0, and they'll have audio directions to go with this. And they're adding just 1 beat at a time because you realize a lot of our students that's just right where they are in their developmental level. On the other side, we're giving them a number of items at the top, and we're asking them to replicate it using the beads on the tray on the right-hand side and pulling it into the 10 frame here. And so this is another way that we're asking students to use those counting strategies to work with addition and subtraction techniques. Now, they're actually going to get into the next topic here. So this is going to also, one of the things that the students are going to have to work on also, or know also getting into Dreambox, is being able to represent and recall sets with pictures, icons, representations of quantity. And then when they're right about 4 years old, we do want them to also be able to match sets 1 to 5 with corresponding numbers and recall those, the size of the sets using the numbers, which I know sometimes we have students who come into our buildings who haven't seen numbers before. I know plenty of my kindergartners did, so that's something we definitely need to work on with them too. So this is a little bit more advanced, so building decades on hundreds chart, and we all know at kindergarten we spend a lot of time with 1 through 10 and 11 through 20. Then also building 1 to 10 optimally. So this one is that we saw that before when we're adding on. Now we're also finding the digit on the digit line, and we're trying to also work on building this number in the fewest number of moves possible. So in this particular example, finding 5 and then 3 to create that number at 8. Now I do want to address an issue that Shannon brought up, and she says it jumps a bit. One student was working on filling in a hundreds chart, one line of it, and she was getting discouraged because she just didn't get it. You know what, I'm going to show you when we go into assignments, we're going to go into some different assignment examples, and I'm going to make sure that we go into that building so I can show you where that is, how to find it, and then that's something we can practice with students. And I'm also going to send that feedback to our development team that it's jumping around a bit, so they can take a look at that. And Shannon, if you can let me know, you can send me a private message and let me know that student so we can take a look at their account, because I definitely want to make sure that we're giving that kid everything that they need to be successful. So thanks for sharing that. All right, so last couple things. So one of the things that we really work on is Subitizing. So instantly recognizing collections of objects. At the age 3, we expect them to be able to instantly recognize collections of objects with 4 or less when it's briefly flashed or briefly shown. It does get more complicated as they're working through that pre-K and kindergarten content. So here's a couple examples. So we flash through on the left-hand side at the top. It stays stagnant, and we flash the numbers at the bottom, and we ask them to find which one is more. On the other side, on the right-hand side, sometimes we'll flip that top card and ask the student to maybe match the number in some cases, or to find something that is more or less, okay? And so these are just a couple examples of some of the things that students will get introduced to at that pre-K kindergarten level. Now, along with those lessons and these units that are really developmentally appropriate for students who are coming in at kind of preschool, kindergarten level, we also need to focus on behaviors with students in kindergarten. So we know that there's a lot we have to teach. We have to teach those kids about how to be in school. So we need to demonstrate, we need them to really get these modeled by you all. So we ask them to wait for the lesson to load, to listen to the directions, to think, and then to select. And I know that that can be really tough, because I think about my my kindergarten kids, and I think about the ones I call them my impulsive puppies. Those ones who just love to click and love to move and just want to get through it and engage. So this can be really helpful to have these visuals, and I'll make sure I send this slide out so it can be sent out to everyone implementing Dreambox. Just as a reminder, but you can also give them, I always love to do a little bit of a visual too, and a little bit of a dance. And so you can tell them to wait, to listen, to think, and then to select. And so that can be really, really helpful. You know, they've got that little dance, wait, oh yeah, I'm supposed to listen, to think, and then to select, and that can help the students. Sometimes I'm sure you'll probably see them even doing that little dance with their computers too. So. And great question from Jeff. So sometimes the Subitizing opportunities do use the 10 frames, and we do use the 10 frames in those Subitizing opportunities because I realize that they need that 10 frame structure to really understand and help them see those object groupings. So yes, absolutely. And you know what? That actually brings us up. So you gave me the perfect segue, Jeff, to the next slide, because one of the things that you can do is explicitly teach these students with some of these tools. So there is a way to do that within the Dreambox dashboard, and through the also through the Teacher Hub. When you go to the Teacher Tools, you can bring up some of these interactive lessons. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick so you can use these in your classrooms. So, ooh, it logged me out of my dashboard. All right, here we go. So from your dashboard, when you log in, oops, if you log in correctly, here we go. If you go to the resource hubs and then select your Teacher Hub, if you scroll partway down that page, so I'm going to scroll, here we go to the Teacher Tools. This gives you interactive whiteboard tools that you can use with your kids. And we included some of those Subitizing lessons because we realized that that often can be really a big challenge. So we've got kindergarten number sense and equivalence lessons, as well as kindergarten addition and subtraction lessons. And those are really pre-K and kindergarten level lessons. I'm also, when we get to AssignFocus, I'm going to show you ways that you can access these lessons through AssignFocus. There's actually a preview lesson button, and you can use those in your classrooms as well. So we'll definitely make sure we get to that. Now, another thing that we want to make sure happens when students are working in Dreambox is that we're monitoring their work. So one of the best ways to quickly identify if they're maybe not efficiently completing lessons is to use the classroom overview report. So each column of the report, remember, is going to be sortable. So if you go in and click on the lessons column, that's going to sort to the kids from least to greatest for as far as their lesson completion. And so, for example, we're going to take a look at Jewel here, who's only completed 2 lessons in 24 minutes. Now remember, when students are completing lessons, the lessons should take them about 5 to 10 minutes, and they should be able to complete about 5 to 10 lessons per week if they've got 30 to 60 minutes in Dreambox. So keeping in mind Jewel, who had 2 lessons in 24 minutes, we take a look at her. She's actually a kid who's clicking into and out of lessons. So that's another behavior that we can see from our pre-K and kindergarten students. Even our older students sometimes have this behavior. So we need to remind them to go into the lessons and to complete the lessons. And if they're having trouble, we can play the lesson with them using this play lesson button. That's another way to provide a little support for them. We also want to take a look at those lesson cards. So just as a reminder, we'll see the lesson paused. If they're having trouble, then we'll see the check mark in it, letting us know that Dreambox adapted backward. Or if they're really having a hard time, then we'll see that they have a may need attention symbol. The other thing that we might see from our students who are just learning about all about Dreambox is sometimes when they're in that learning environment, they'll go up into My House and they'll spend some extended time there. So, or even in the top right-hand corner into the arcade. Those are really fun and really engaging. They love getting the coins. They love playing the games. But if we find that the students are spending too much time in those areas, we can always turn that off by going into the dashboard, going into your classroom, clicking the edit button, and turning them off in the engagement restrictions tab. And just let me know if anyone wants me to go over how to do that. I'm more than happy to do that as well. So I want to pause before we get to AssignFocus next, and just let me know if you have any questions about how to support your students and about that content. Because I know that not every student walks into our building ready for everything we want to do with them, especially in kindergarten. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit about different ways to help those students, and also about the content so that you have a better understanding and can help those kids. So hopefully we can get them on Dreambox too. So I'll just pause for a moment and see if anyone has any questions. Great question. So great. You know what, Jamie? I hear you. So you're right. Language can be tough for a lot of our students. And I totally understand. And I would say, like, go for those teacher tools to help them and to get them ready for Dreambox. And I'll teach you how to use AssignFocus so that you can all get those students ready to go on Dreambox too. All right. So, and Jeff, you missed that answer to Larissa's question. Great. I'm glad you asked it again. So if the student has on their activity card, they have that little triangle with an exclamation point in it. If the student has that, then that means that the student has completed, is having trouble with that. So they failed similar lessons in that lesson group 2 or more times. And then our suggestion is really click the play lesson link to check with the student, see if determine if they're stuck, and then you can coach them, see if they're using the manipulative, see if they're using the help button, and see kind of what that gap or misunderstanding is. So you know what, Jamie? Yes, there is pre-K content, and we'll show you that in the AssignFocus. I think is a good way to get into it. Some of it is pre-K content, and it's getting them ready for some of that kindergarten content too. So I'll show you how to get into from the Dreambox learning units in the AssignFocus. All right, so let's actually go into AssignFocus next. I know some of you are brand new to Dreambox, so we'll talk just a little bit about what it is. But basically, it was created based upon teacher feedback, and it enables teachers to easily create focused assignments using real-time proficiency data about each learner in your classroom. So assignments can be used to complement your core curriculum or for targeted intervention. There are actually 2 different assignment types. So you can do short-term and now long-term assignments. So a student can have up to 2 assignments at any given time, being a combination of 1 short-term and 1 long-term, 2 short-term or 2 long-term assignments. The short-term assignments were designed to really complement your curriculum. So they're typically 2 lessons, and students have 1 or 2 weeks to complete that lesson. You get to decide whether it's 1 or 2 weeks. For the long-term assignments, they're really for long-term targeted intervention. These assignments are anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks long. The student will have that concept assigned to them until they show proficiency in that topic that you choose, as well as until the time period is up. One or the other. They either gain proficiency and finish, or the time period is up. Okay? All right, and we're going to go into the dashboard and actually explore the ways that you can assign lessons through AssignFocus. And while we're doing that, Shannon had a great question in the chat. So the question is, after 5 months of weekly usage, about how many standards should be completed by the average student at the kindergarten level? So I'll get you the exact number from our curriculum team. But generally, I would say overall, for most grade levels, they usually have about somewhere between 1 and 3 standards met every month in Dreambox. So it should be somewhere about 5 standards, but I want to double check and make sure that I'm giving you the right answer. So I'm going to make sure I send that out via email afterward. Okay? Because I want to double check and make sure that my pacing is right for that one. Great question. All right, so this is what we see when we log into the dashboard. So we're going to go into the K2 class, and we're going to bring up first the standards button, the standards tab. Now there are actually 3 different ways that you can assign lessons. I'm going to show you each one of them. We'll talk about kind of why you would use each one. So first, there's a grid view that you can use. Second is going to be a grouping view, and then last, there is an AssignFocus tab that you can use to assign lessons. So the first one is through the grid view. I'm actually going to back this up to kindergarten. We'll take a look at those kindergarten standards, and right now we're set to Common Core standards. But to get a look at some of those lesson groups that we were really talking about through the, when we're talking about pre-K, kindergarten, we're going to click on the Common Core Standards button, and we're going to change it to Dreambox Learning Units, which is another way to look at the standards and the content that students look at when they're working in Dreambox. So here are the Dreambox Learning Units just for kindergarten, and we can see for this class exactly where each student is for each one of these standards. So the green dot, remember, it means that the student is proficient. That means they've been through all the content with demonstrated understanding. The blue half moon means that the student is in progress or currently got some lessons working on that particular concept. And then may need attention lets us know that the student has been struggling on that area. So this is a little indicator to let you know that that's an area where the student has been struggling, and Dreambox is adapting for that to try to help that student. You can add an assignment from this place. So let's say that I'm working on building 1 to 10 optimally in my classroom, and I want to give my students a little extra practice on this. I can click the assignment button here, and it will take me into AssignFocus. Okay, that is one way that we can go into the AssignFocus feature from that data review. Now, I like doing it from starting out with the grid view because it does allow me to first see just the standards that my students have been working on and where they are, okay? From here, I go to the grouping view. And you're right, Jamie, we did not separate the pre-K standards from kindergarten. We wrapped them all up into kindergarten because we realized that that's something that they're all going to need to know for kindergarten. And I totally understand your frustration. You know, I'm going to talk to our development team about that too, if there's some way that we can better surface that for you all to make it a little bit easier and help get those students exactly what they need. All right, so from here, the other thing that I can do is use the drop down to go to the grouping view, okay? At the grouping view, I can select a domain or select a topic that I want to work on. So this is a Dreambox Learning Unit, so it's a category. So I've got counting, for example. And then I can pick a lesson group, or if I was in Common Core State Standards, I would pick the domain and then I would pick the standard. So here I can see where the kids are using Dreambox right now, and there's an Add Assignment button. And that takes us to the assignment feature as well. So that's the second way that they can get into AssignFocus. The last way that students can get into AssignFocus is through the Assignment tab here, the AssignFocus tab. Okay, that AssignFocus tab has an Add Assignment button right there. So the Add Assignment button allows us to get into that same screen that we saw just before. And now we can see the two assignment types. So here we can see short-term or long-term. There are a couple reasons why you'd want to do each one. So short-term is really to connect what your students are doing in Dreambox to the content that they're doing in the classroom. It can be a way to introduce the topic, to reinforce it, to kind of do a check-in and see where they are with it, as well as give them additional review, especially sometimes you want to do that before an assessment too. Then we also have the long-term, so that's the short-term option. The short-term option we'll just go over first is it can be a 1 week or 2 week assignment, and we can select the grade level. I'm going to switch, we're going to stay here, let's go to kindergarten. And the category we're going to go into is comparisons and ordering. And then we'll go into identifying more or less than equal, just as an example. Okay, so here I can decide the 1 or 2 week assignment. They're going to get 1 or 2 lessons depending on the level we see them working at. So here, the kids in the standard not started category would give them, we would give them 2 just started lessons to help them introduce the topic. If I had kids in the standard in progress category, then they would get 2 lessons that are right in line with what Dreambox is going to give them anyway, and those are the in progress lessons that I see here. The proficient and standard students are the students that would get a review lesson. Now, if they do great on that review lesson, it's the only one that they get. If they struggle though, then we'll actually give them a lesson that's a step backward and provide them with extra support. Now, one way that you can access some of those lessons we were talking about earlier is through these buttons here. And I would go for those just started lessons. So I'm just going to click on it just to show an example. And so you're going to hear a little bit of audio. You'll hear Stella, our narrator, talking. And you can bring this up on a whiteboard. You can use a digital projector, play this on a computer station with your students, and have them play with you. So this is one of those ones where we flash it. So this is one way that you can get into the lesson, and you can play it with your students if you want to use this as an instructional tool in your classroom. I'm just going to close out of this. And you can do that with any of these 3 buttons, the just started, the in progress, or the review lesson. Now, you get to pick the kids, they get the assignment. Dreambox determines the level of lesson they get depending on which category they are in, okay? So here I pick the kids, and then I would click the Add Assignment button, and that would give them that short-term assignment. They would have either 1 or 2 weeks to complete the lesson, and then it would disappear from their activities with the lessons that they could choose in their feed. Now, if I wanted to do a longer-term assignment, I have a choice. I can do anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks here. And then I get to select the grade level, the domain, and then the standard, or here I'm in lesson groups. And then I can see at the bottom, once again, the students, and I select those students. Now for this one, I probably don't want to select the proficient and standard students because this is a long-term assignment to get with the intention of getting those students from wherever they are when I give the assignment to 100% proficiency for this topic or for this standard. Okay, so that means that these proficient and standard kids will only get 1 lesson. So we're going to probably give it to the standard not started or standard in progress kids. so that we see we give them multiple lessons to get toward that 100% proficiency. Great question, Jamie. So the history of their work on the assigned lesson does remain after their assignment is up. So if you assign for a week, okay, now I see the second part of your question. So you do get, as a teacher, you get the assignment history where you get to see what they did. If you want them to, you give a 1 week assignment and they don't finish after that week ends, then you can actually go back and reassign it, but it will let you know, hey, they didn't complete that assignment, and you can go back and do that again. So that's why we really want to encourage the students to get into the assigned lessons. So I'll show you what those assigned lessons look like. Because I do understand, you're right. If they don't click into it, they don't complete it, and that 1 week is up, poof, it disappears. So if you make an assignment, then we want to direct them to go into these lessons. So this lesson is an assigned lesson, so it's going to have a little notebook icon. Now, the lessons that are short-term lessons, so that last either 1 or 2 weeks, are going to have a star on it. So we want to make sure that those stars, they go into those first. If it's a longer term assignment, then it's actually going to have a different icon on it. Let me show you what that looks like. I think it's also in the dashboard here. So the longer term assignment, oh, actually it doesn't. Let me find that for you all. There's a little visual. The longer term assignment actually has a different icon on it. So it's going to have a blue icon still, but instead of having the star on it, it's actually going to have this calendar on it instead. So that kind of notes the difference between long-term and short-term. So for a short-term assignment, star, long-term, it's the calendar. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the data. Oh, you know what? Actually, there's one more thing I wanted to show you, and I'm going to send this out as well. So this document will show you what you can assign. Get it up on the screen here. So this is going to show us, with all of the grade levels, what you can assign using AssignFocus. So I'm going to scroll down and go down to, let's go to grade 2. We haven't talked about that grade today. So here we can see the Common Core State Standards that are covered in Dreambox for grade 2. And then we can also look at the Dreambox Learning Units. And with this, the Dreambox Learning Units, it's going to describe the types of things that students are doing. So that can be really helpful. The Dreambox Learning Units do tend to be kind of a bigger group of lessons than just the Common Core standards, because they do tend to cover a little bit more ground. So that's, if you want to give a long-term assignment, you might want to think about using those Dreambox Learning Units so students are actually working on more content. So I'm going to make sure that we send this document out as well so you all can use it for AssignFocus. All right, so once an assignment has been completed by your students, I'm going to describe these changes real quick and go back into AssignFocus. You go to the AssignFocus tab, and this is where you can see the assignments that you've made. So here, I can choose whether I want to look at the short-term assignments or the long-term assignments. So let's start with short-term. So short-term are those 1 or 2 week assignments that just disappear after a student's time period is up. So here we see that the students we're working on building up to 20 optimally. And this is an assignment that the students haven't worked on yet. We just made this assignment. So we can see that the status for this particular one is not started. We're going to scroll down to another one. So this one's building columns on a hundreds chart. So for this short-term assignment, I can see every student that was given the assignment. And remember, it doesn't have to be the whole class. It can just be 1 or 2 kids or a group of kids. So here we can see whether or not the assignment was completed, the time they spent on it, and the level of lesson or lesson type they got. Now that key for the lesson type is going to be over here on the right-hand side. So is it a just started lesson? Is it a progressing lesson? Or is it a review lesson? So that's going to kind of cue you into where their starting point was for these lessons. Then when it says lessons here, I can see whether or not the lesson was completed. And there's a little key here for lesson completion. So did they demonstrate understanding? Maybe the green check marks, we're going to use that again. And we saw on the lesson cards. If they didn't demonstrate understanding, then we use the gray check mark. And if they didn't complete the lesson, then we'll see that open circle. And that's letting me know I might want to assign this again, or maybe I want to pull that student and review with them because they didn't work on the assignment. So here I look at the lessons. Now for any kid who hasn't completed a lesson successfully, like for example, let me pull it up a little closer, Mamie here, when I click the More button, I can view that lesson and I can play through that lesson with the student. So that can be really helpful. If I had multiple students who were at the progressing level and they didn't get through a lesson with demonstrated understanding, then I can click that View Lesson button and we can play this as a group, or another great way to do this is to play this as a whole class. Hey guys, I gave you an assignment. Let's go over it, just like you would some other assignments that you do in other places. You can go over those assignments in Dreambox and have the kids work through it and show off the great learning that they do, or even teach each other a little bit. It's a great way to bring this lesson into your classroom instruction. So that is all for the short-term assignment. And if you have questions, make sure you're entering those in the chat. The next thing we're going to look at is the long-term assignment. Remember, long-term assignments are anywhere from 2 to 10 weeks long, and they'll see a calendar icon on the lessons for that long-term assignment. Now, for long-term assignments, they'll continue to get those assignments with the calendar icon on them until the time period is up. So they can play lots of lessons and make lots of growth. So this is actually a pretty high-level lesson in this example, but here we see a lesson that was assigned, and we can see the status tells us whether or not the students on this list have completed all of the content for this assignment, for the standard or for the lesson group if it's a Dreambox learning unit or not. So if it says goal not reached, that means they didn't reach 100% proficiency. If it says goal reached, they completed all of that content, okay? So also see the total time that they spent, and that's not just on one lesson, that's on all of the lessons that they worked on. The lesson type, once again, same thing, so just started, progressing, or review. And then the lessons, this is a number of lessons that they completed. So for some of our students, it's quite a few. And we'll notice that this varies for students. So we had one student who was progressing who got had to do 9 lessons, and another student who had to do 7. And that's because what we realized is some of the students were starting in different places, slightly different places. So some of them were maybe a little further on. Maybe some of them, when they got rolling on some of these lessons, they really showed us that they understood. And so we didn't have to take them through as many lessons to demonstrate understanding as others. So we're going to click on this View button here. And that's going to show us a chart that demonstrates what students did. So here, this student started on right here on this chart. So at 18% of the way through the Dreambox content. So already before we made this long-term assignment. We want them by the end of these 4 weeks to gain 100% proficiency. So week 1, they spent 20 minutes and they did 4 lessons. Week 2, they did 5 minutes on 1 lesson. Week 3, and they had already reached their goal, and so we're not going to see any data for week 3 and week 4 because they reached it in week 2. And so Dreambox decided, okay, they've reached proficiency, we're going to stop assigning the lessons. And we'll keep assigning them either until the student has reached proficiency or until that time period for the assignments are up. When I scroll below this chart, I can see the weeks that they worked and the lessons that they worked on. So here are the 4 lessons that they worked on in week 1. I can see that they demonstrated understanding on all of them, and I can play each one of those lessons. In week 2, here's the lesson that they worked on, and I can play the lesson again. So this is printable. Good questions from Jeff. So looking at this chart, that shaded area is just helping us highlight that this is the the aim line that we want students to go for. So we anticipate that they'll follow about this trajectory if we want them to get to the 100% proficiency. This blue line above it for this student is the actual trend line of what the student actually accomplished, which won't always follow exactly with that blue shaded area. As you can see here, sometimes it'll be above, sometimes for a struggling student, it might be below. And by the way, if you have a student who has been given an assignment and we see after they've worked through 3 lessons or they've reached a point where they've failed 3 lessons or they've had trouble on 3 consecutive lessons, then we will stop that long-term assignment because we do want to make sure that the student is not continually working on something that's frustrating. We'll put an alert in this long-term assignment. So we'll let you know that the assignment was stopped because the student did not demonstrate understanding. So that's really important too, because we don't want to give those kids something that's going to continue to be frustrating for them, but we also want to let you know that that's happened too. This is printable, so if you're using this as an intervention and you need to have this in that maybe if you keep a data notebook on your students, you can print this out to document this as an intervention that you use for your students. So that is AssignFocus. If you need a refresher on what AssignFocus is, how it works, there's a video in the AssignFocus tab on the right-hand side. So I want to just pause. I know we've had a lot of content and a lot of talking, and see if you all have any questions before we go on to a discussion question real quick here. So we're going to go ahead. If you're typing, just keep going. I promise we'll answer your question. So the discussion question here, I want to see just as you're thinking about this new feature in Dreambox, using both long and short-term assignments, how could you use AssignFocus with your students? Great question, Jamie. So if there is a student who's very close to meeting a standard, you could give them an assignment and it would boost them up to meeting that standard. Absolutely. All right, everyone. So a few thoughts on this question. So if you want to use AssignFocus with your students, love it. Thanks, Shannon. So you can assign the lesson to see if classwork progress is matching Dreambox progress. Great. Yep. A little check-in is always nice. If you're typing your answer, don't worry. I'm going to give you a little cheat sheet here. Couple other things that we thought about at Dreambox, but I love your ideas too. For the short-term assignments, it can be to assess a student's content knowledge prior to teaching a standard, to introduce that content before you teach it, and provide a little background knowledge, spot check while you're teaching, and then review content at the end of a unit. That also can be valuable. Long-term assignments really are meant to be that specific targeted intervention, and it also can help you chart growth over time within a specific standard. So if you know something is really challenging for your students, sometimes teachers use this for charting growth over a time with a specific standard. We actually did this with a test group of educators, and that was one of the things that they did was they, especially some of those second and third grade teachers, were assigning certain standards that they found particularly challenging at their grade levels and gave the students some opportunities to get some targeted help with Dreambox. So you probably got an email in your inbox somewhat recently about this. So Dreambox Nation is basically an interactive community that's created for you all as educators. So this is a place where you can connect with other educators who are using Dreambox. You can ask questions in forums and get answers. We have some great teacher leaders who are also kind of helping us monitor that and the forums and adding in their different ideas and sharing best practices. Also, when you participate in anything in Dreambox Nation, we call them challenges, you actually earn points. So your students get to earn points when they're working in Dreambox and they get to purchase things and and play games. You actually get points toward prizes. So event scholarships, like some of the conferences like NCTM, And then also there's just some fun swag and also classroom supplies. So there are classroom boxes of crayons and those sorts of things that I know spending a lot of money out of pocket for. So that's another way that we reward you for kind of participating in this environment. And just real quick to highlight some of the challenges, some of them are really easy. So they can be things about lesson planning or something that you want to share, some product feedback. So we reward you for your thoughts and for your ideas. So I definitely encourage you to share that because we definitely are monitoring this and taking a look at that information. So do make sure that you go ahead and log into that Dreambox Nation. And then finally, just our final discussion question for today. Biggest takeaway from today's webinar, and it could even be a question for me that you want to share with another team and you want me to get back to you on. I'm more than happy to do that too. A couple things that I am going to follow up on. So I know that we've got a student that's kind of jumping around in some things and having some issues with that building decades on 100s chart. Yeah, absolutely, Jamie. Go ahead and unmute and ask. Absolutely. Go for it.
My biggest frustration, because I want it to work for all of my kids, but and saying, like, when we say there's pre-K content, I think we need to be honest, there isn't pre-K content, because if there was pre-K content, we would see specific lessons with specific pre-K level activities, working 1 to 5 and counting 1 to 5 rather than overwhelming them with 1 to 10.
And you know, I'm really glad that you've actually shared that, because I want to take that back to the curriculum development team and say, hey, here's something that we're missing.
Yeah, it's huge.
The mark on. That this is huge. You're right. For those really, really, really low kids, this is something we need to focus on, that 1 to 5 to make sure that we have enough lessons to cover that, to really get that understanding from those really low kids. Yeah, absolutely. Well, you know what? And I mean this. I'm going to contact the curriculum team right after the webinar, because they're on the West Coast, so I know they're still working in the office. So I'm going to talk to them about that concern, and then see if there's, I don't know if they have anything in development to kind of flesh out more of that for students who really are pre-K level. And I'll see if I can come up with a better answer for you, because I'm not satisfied either. If that's what's the experience you're having, that's not what we want to have, and I want to make sure we do something to help you. Well, thank you all. I want to thank you all so much, and really thank you, honestly, for the feedback. I'm going to contact that curriculum team next. Now, also next, you all do have a little bit of a follow-up for this webinar. So on PD on Demand. Now, to access PD on Demand, you're going to go into your teacher dashboard. Oh, and I have to log into mine again. It logged me back out. So when you log into your teacher dashboard, you're going to go into the teacher hub. So going into the resource hubs, and I've actually got my teacher hub up. You go to PD on Demand here. And you all do have, because your district does purchase PD on Demand, you're going to go to this login here that says Unlimited Access, and you'll be able to log in. There will be an assignment where you'll have to go into AssignFocus and complete a couple questions. So that's kind of your follow-up after today's webinar. If you do have continued questions about Dreambox, I'm going to follow up on some of this pre-K kind of, what do I do with my struggling learners, and how is Dreambox working through this issue to really help my students. I'm going to follow up on that. I'm also going to send out the What Can Teachers Assign document, and that little graphic that I had on the 4 things that your students need to do when they're working in Dreambox. That wait, listen, think. Oh, and Larissa wants to jump in on that assignment. I'm going to send that to you, but I'll also give you my contact information, the client success team. And Larissa, go ahead and jump in on that follow-up assignment. Thank you.
So we have posted in our e-learning this webinar, the blended webinar. And so we actually posted the assignment in our e-learning. So for everyone taking the webinar, you can definitely access the PD on Demand. But as far as the assignment about looking at 2 of the lessons in AssignFocus, that's now in e-learning. You go to your student You switch to a student and you'll see the this Dreambox blended webinar. And you have till next Wednesday to complete it. And Jeff Good and I will be in there if you have any questions.
Great. Thanks, Larissa.
Sure.
Awesome. So if you do have questions or want to send comments my way, love to hear from you all. So do make sure that you follow up with me and email me. If you are having some issues with Dreambox, our client success team is there for you. They're available at the 877 number that's on the screen from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. And then you can always email them at support@dreambox.com. So I want to thank you all so much for spending some of your precious after-school time with us this evening. I really appreciate the interaction. I love the questions. I even love the pushback. You know what? That's going to make us better as a tool. And thank you all just so much for that. So have a great evening.
Thanks, Stacy.
Thank you.